Good evening. Welcome to Fantasy Island. Okay. Sorry about that. Forgot we were live. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Sunday. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Let me get started over here and we'll do the intros and all that and get on with reading this stuff. Welcome everybody. Let me get some stuff going on here. Give me a second to get you guys set up. And then I'll get other stuff set up, okay? Give me a second. Too many buttons to push between 3 different networks here. Where is it? Chat. Okay, there you are. All right, welcome. Let me get the other guys set up so I can get that going, and we're gonna have a good time. So give me a second here. Here we go over here. Okay, switch the camera over. Switch my camera. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, we wait for the other guys to come up, and here we go. Ooh, we got really good internet speed tonight, too. Real excited about that. What's that? Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's Sunday night here at California Haunts, and right now we're broadcasting California Haunts Radio. I do have a podcast, and well, Sunday night is the night that we try to relax a little bit, and right now we're broadcasting on 3 networks. I can mention TikTok. I can't mention any of the other networks, but welcome in. And we're reading from the Spirits of Christmas, the Darkside of the Holiday. This book does have Christmas stuff in it, but it also has other stuff in it. And it just, like it says, it's the dark side of the holidays, and that's what this person, my friend, has written. Let me get this. Why am I on the wrong camera? Okay. Weird stuff going on. At least it didn't happen like last week where everything blew up at once. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. Welcome. I see you all here. I would like to, if you could help me out, 50,000 likes tonight. And I do have a goal of collecting 6 chatting popcorn. So if you could help me out with that, that would be great. I hope you have a good time. I'm going to be reading for about an hour from the Spirits of Christmas, the Dark Side of the Holidays. And it's a real nice book written by Sylvia Shults. And we have permission for her to read it, her publisher. And so we're going to be doing that tonight. So hopefully you guys brought your popcorn and you brought your hot cocoa. And all the other good stuff, and you're sitting by the fire and dimming those lights in your house, and or your home, or wherever you are. Hi, Maui, and hope you enjoy this. Sit back and enjoy. Happy holidays, and let's get on with this tonight. Okay, we're finally fairly on schedule, so I will be reading till 7:39 Pacific. So I hope you enjoy it, and this is my podcast studio, by the way. So I hope you enjoy it, and double tap that screen, and we're trying to get 50,000 likes tonight, and I do have some chatting popcorn. If you'd like for me to collect it or help me collect my chatting popcorn, that would be great as well. All right, so here we go, and I can't say the other side, so we're just going to say Y and F. Welcome. I see Pamela out there. Welcome. And just a quick note, starting Monday, tomorrow, we're going to be going on Christmas hours. And that's for you too, Pamela. Starting at 4:30 p.m. Pacific every day up until Christmas, we will be doing a project, whether it's a gingerbread house or a Lego or even building a model of the Millennium Falcon. We're going to be doing some Christmas projects. And so 4:30 to 6 will be projects, and then breakdown, and then 6:30 to 10 or 11 will be our regular psychic readings. Okay, so we're in Christmas mode, so I'm going to be broadcasting to all 3 networks while we're doing that. So it's going to get pretty interesting. Everybody, follow and share this to 5 people over here, so we get more people involved with this. I'm going to do something really quick because I can feel the warmth in here. I am going to wet down one of my napkins here real quick because it does get really hot in here, and so I can swipe my forehead. Unlike my other studio, where the bright lights are a lot further away from me, they're rather on top of me in here. There we go. Okay. Now I can just swipe my forehead. I need someone in here to swipe my forehead. Welcome, everybody. I cannot see. I can tell certain names. I can't tell certain things over there because it's small. I'm a blind bat. So if you do gift or something, just know that thank you very much. One of my moderators should be in there at some point too, because they're usually moving around. Hi, Amanda. Welcome. All right, everybody, let's get going. Uh, so we're going to start. We've been talking about some different vanishings and ghost stories and things like that. And this book delves with that. It also deals with some tragedy, holiday tragedy. That's why it not only encompasses Christmas, but it encompasses the winter itself. Okay, so everybody sit back, relax, enjoy. Let's do this. And I see we got two people online over there, three people online over there. I think if I can see that far. Okay, so here we go. Oh, it just changed pages on me. Give me a second. Uh-oh. Oh, how could you? Hang on. I hate when it does this. I think we're on the right page. Yeah. I think. Okay, there's one after the other. They went. Hang on. Yeah, I think this is the one. It just jumped on me, and I'm sorry. See, we were doing stuff and having such a great time, and now it just popped it out. So I don't know. Okay, hang on. Let me see. Let me make sure I got the right one, okay? Leaving was popcorn. This is the one. Okay. This is the last one on here. So give me a second. I touched it and it jumped on me. This Kindle is very sensitive, so give me a second, okay? Let me make sure, okay? Okay. All right, the first one we're gonna be reading is called the Glastonbury Vanishings, and we'll read about 3 or 4 of these tonight before we run out of time. So again, I'm starting at 6:42 p.m. Pacific. We're going till 7:42. Okay. So everybody sit back and enjoy. It's a different type of night. It's a way to get into your week, get into your work week and pleasant dreams, right? All right, double tap that screen, everybody. Show me some love. Same thing over some love on the other two networks. The Glastonbury Vanishings by Sylvia Shults. This area, the area around Glastonbury Mountain, near Bennington, Vermont. What is it with Vermont? It's New England's version of the Bermuda Triangle. Let me pull this down over towards me, okay? In the late 1940s and early 1950s, at least 6 people disappeared in that area of the state. 2 of these vanishings happened in December. The second person to go missing was an 18-year-old college student, Paula Jean Weldon, a sophomore at Bennington College, set off for a short hike on the Long Trail on Sunday, December 1st, 1946. She never came back out of the woods. The next day, the sheriff's department launched a mass search for the young woman. Deputies were joined by 400 townspeople, including students and faculty at Bennington College. They searched the woods thoroughly for the petite, popular student. In the weeks that followed, teams from the FBI swarmed over the mountain, continuing the desperate search. But despite detailed posters offering a $5,000 reward for Paula's safe return and a $2,000 reward even if she was found unalived, plus the combined efforts of hundreds of volunteers and a famous clairvoyant, no trace of Paula was ever found. On December 22nd, the Sheriff's Department officially ended the search, and Paula's heartbroken family and friends were left to celebrate a bleak Christmas without her. Exactly 3 years to the day later, on December 1st, 1949, Jim Tedford became the third person in the area to go missing. He was a World War II veteran, age 56. Oddly enough, things in Tedford's life were already a bit strange. In the early 1940s, Tedford came home one day to find that his wife, Pearl, had disappeared without a trace. Jim, as mentioned, was in his 50s. Pearl was 28. Wow. Were they having problems? Did she tire of life with an older man? Had she found someone else? We'll never know. Tedford slipped into a downward spiral of depression, and in 1947, he moved into a veterans home in Bennington, Vermont. He kept to himself, mired in his personal misery. He left the home only occasionally to visit relatives in St. Albans. He finished up such a visit that early December day in 1949 and got on a bus to return to Bennington. Incredibly, witnesses saw him get on that bus, but apparently he never got off. Even the bus driver had no explanation as to how one of his passengers could disappear without a trace from a moving bus. Native Americans believed Glastonbury spread of wildland, full of strange lights and unexplained sounds. Some of the settlers came away with tales of monstrous animals, and some people, like Jim Tedford and Paula Jean Weldon, simply vanished into that unknown. Now, here's what you guys might have heard of. And I actually saw something like this similar up in the gold country up here, doing a ghost investigation. Hello, everybody. Hi, Timothy. Good to see you. Yeah. So I actually ran into this phenomena up here in the gold country. A car pulls over to the side of Highway 90 in West Texas, rolling to a stop with a soft crunch on the desert sands. Another car follows, and drivers and passengers get out. Someone is thought to be lawn chairs. Those out chairs perch on the hoods of cars. The engines tick softly as they cool in the night air. Everyone looks towards the horizon, southeast of Marfa. There they are. Glowing balls of light form in the distance, swooping across the landscape. They change color every so often, fading from red to blue, back to red, and then gleaming white. They are the Marfa lights, and they have been fascinating people since at least 1850s. As with all spook lights, theories abound as to what the Marfa lights actually are. Skeptics say there's a perfectly logical explanation. The tail lights are campfires, perhaps, or lights from passing cars. Believers point out the absence of car headlights in the 19th century, which was when the lights were first reported. Whatever they are, the Marfa light be mostly aloof, but sometimes friendly, even whimsical. They usually appear as glowing points of light far off in the distance, but some viewers claim to have been approached by the lights. They say the lights can zip across the desert at astonishing speeds and dissolve right before cannoning into the onlookers. Most people who have watched these lights agree that the lights are not a threat. In fact, one winter night, a rancher had a close encounter with the lights, and they saved his life. Halfway between Marfa and Alpine, Texas, are the Shinati Mountains. Years ago, a local rancher was out late in the day driving his strayed stock down from the mountains slopes. A blizzard whipped up, and the rancher was caught out in the nasty weather as night fell. He knew he had little chance of making, but walking would be to freeze to death. The rancher had no choice but head home, but he soon realized he'd lost the trail. A huge boulder blocked his way. He was hopelessly lost. Suddenly, the rancher was face to face with several flashing lights. They spoke with him, telling him that he was dangerously close to the edge of a cliff. He had to follow the lights and trust them or die. The lights bobbed down a trail, lighting it as they went, and the rancher followed them. They led the rancher to a tiny cave where he could escape the vicious wind and driving snow. He crawled into the cave, and a large light followed him. The rancher discovered he could warm himself with the heat radiating from the light. A smaller light wedged itself into the cave, too. The light spoke to the man again. Somehow the rancher understood that the lights were spirits from the distant past that had come to save him. After a while, the man slept, secure in the protection of those lights. When he woke, it was daylight. The lights were gone, and the sun was shining. The man crawled out of the cave and stood, getting his bearings. He noticed the boulder that had blocked his trail the night before. Cautiously, he climbed it and peered down over the cliff edge the lights had warned him about. And to kind of augment on this, thank you for the heart me. To kind of augment on this, we did an investigation up in the gold country. This house that was having a lot of issues got a really good EVP in the house, but the client had told us that there was some kind of phantom orb that would float out because this house was about probably, I don't know, like a half mile from the river canyon. And so we go out there, and sure enough, we could see this phantom light floating around, and it was floating over the canyon. So it wasn't from the river, because I'm saying the river was like way down. So it wasn't anything from the river. I mean, we had all our headlamps off and everything, and this thing was floating out over the canyon. So we've had our own experience with like Marfa lights. The darkest midnight in December. Sadly, let me do this real quick. Some tragedies that plague us during the rest of the year can happen during the most joyful season too. Please remember that I do have permission from the author and her self-publishing company to read this, okay? As these stories show. Some of the stories have spirits associated with them. Others simply stand as grim reminders of life's frailty. Here are several tales of murder, mayhem, and malevolence. The Curse of Tecumseh. One of the main characters in the ongoing story of the clashes between whites and Native Americans was Tecumseh, leader of the Shawnee. Tecumseh and his brother, Ted, I'm going to call it T. I can't even pronounce this word. T, who called himself the Prophet, tangled regularly with future President William Henry Harrison. Born to wealthy parents near Richmond, Virginia, Harrison joined the Army in 1791 and distinguished himself in the early Indian Wars. In those days, the western frontier was a wilderness below the Great Lakes, in the area that later became Ohio and Indiana. Tecumseh and T formed a large confederation of tribes in that area. The wrangling between Harrison as governor of Indiana Territory and the two brothers as the leaders of the Indian tribes was not only military, but social and political, too. In the early 1800s, Harrison was looking for a way to discredit the brothers in the eyes of their people. In 1806, he sent an open letter to the tribes gathered at Tippecanoe, which the Shawnee used as, hang on, it's pulling my hair, ow, which the Shawnee used as their main home. Harrison issued a challenge to the tribe's leaders. If he, referring to T, is really a prophet, ask him to cause the sun to stand still or the moon to alter its course, the rivers to cease to flow, or the dead to rise from their graves. Harrison, a Christian, was framing his challenge from a Christian perspective. Quite literally, he was asking for T to perform a miracle to prove his fitness to lead. The letter was duly delivered to the brothers for consideration. Now, when you ask someone from a nature-oriented culture involving nature, they're liable to take you seriously. According to one story, Tecumseh and T shut themselves away for an hour to confer in private. When the hour was up, they came out and ordered the tribe to gather to hear the reply to Harrison. T announced that, as the prophet, he had consulted with the Great Spirit, and boy was she mad. The Great Spirit, it seemed, was displeased by Harrison's audacious request. The prophet announced, 50 days from this day there will be no cloud in the sky, yet. When the sun has reached its highest point, at that moment will the Great Spirit take it into her hand and hide it from us. The darkness of night will cover us, and the stars will shine round about us. The birds will roost, and the night creatures will awaken and stir. The day predicted for this apocalyptic event was June 16, 1806. Around noon that day, a total solar eclipse crossed the region. In North America, the path of totality stretched from the southern tip of Lake Michigan to just north of Cincinnati. This covered most of the territory occupied by Tecumseh's tribes. Greenville, Ohio, where Tecumseh and T viewed the event with 1,000 or so followers, was not in the path of totality, but they did see the eclipse at an impressive 99% totality. How did T know about the coming eclipse? As a young man, T was an alcoholic. He fell into a fire during a bender and survived. After that, he dedicated his life to preaching sobriety to his people. He kept close to home, preferring the company of his tribe and family. His brother Tecumseh, on the other hand, had a completely different personality. Tecumseh was well-traveled and well-educated to boot. He enjoyed mingling with people of diverse backgrounds. He befriended Mr. Galloway, who lived in western Ohio. Rebecca Galloway, the settler's daughter, taught Tecumseh how to read English. This was a time when most literate households kept an almanac handy. Tecumseh could have seen the news of the June 16th eclipse and filed it away in his mind. It certainly came in handy when he needed to pull a miracle out of his back pocket. Unfortunately, this failed to impress. Hi, Marisa Harrison, and the whites and the natives moved closer and closer to war. Early in 1811, Tecumseh went on a grand tour of the Midwest and down into the southern states. He intended to speak to as many native warriors and chiefs as possible, to try and raise an army to drive the white settlers back to the sea. He spoke with the Sioux and the Apache in the West, and they, being the Sioux and Apache, were totally on board with the plan. But not everyone was willing to listen to Tecumseh's fiery message. The Alabama tribe, who lived along the southern stretch of the Mississippi River, was particularly dismissive of the Shawnee leader's mission. Their chief casually told Tecumseh, "Promises are like the wind. The wind is free. Talk is nothing." This did not sit well with Tecumseh. Furious, he promised that when he returned to his tribe, the Alabama people would be sorry. I will stamp the ground 3 times, and the earth will tremble and shake. It will shake down all your wigwams. You will remember Tecumseh. On December 16th, 1811, the most violent earthquake in the history of the U.S. roared through the central Midwest, with its epicenter at New Madrid, near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. It was just the beginning of months of destruction as the ground continued to shake. The New Madrid, as the ground continued to shake. The New Madrid quakes were the most damaging in Earth's history. Between December 16th, 1811 and March 1812, over 2,000 quakes rocked the central Midwest, and 6,000 to 10,000 pummeled the area around New Madrid. 3 of the New Madrid quakes are on the list of America's top earthquakes. December 16th, 1811, 8.1 on the Richter scale. January 23rd, 1812, 7.8. And February 7th, 1812, as much as 8.8. Boy, that was a wild one. The first quake on December 16th was felt strongly across 130,000 square miles, and moderately over nearly 3 million square miles. It rattled windows as far away as the White House and rang church bells in Boston. The Mississippi River, lifeblood of the Midwest and home to the Alabama tribe, ran backwards for a few hours because of the upheaval of the soil. The exact number of casualties is unknown, but estimates range from several hundred to several thousand dead. The Alabama Indians met each other's terrified glances. Tecumseh did say he was going to stamp his feet and make the earth tremble. Coincidence? Or the supernatural power of a man at the end of his rope with frustration over the decline of his culture and his people? Interesting. Very interesting. On December 5th, 1876, this one's called the Brooklyn Theater Fire. Sorry about that. On December 5th, 1876, theater patrons streamed into the Brooklyn Theater in New York City. They were there to attend a held-over show called The Two Orphans. The Brooklyn Theater had been built in 1871, opening its doors for the first performance on October 2nd of that year. The Brooklyn soon became a showplace in the New York theater scene. Built on the site of the old St. John's Episcopal Church, the theater was designed in an L shape with 2 wings. This being New York City, space was at a premium even then, and the theater hotel was tucked into the angle between the 2 wings of the theater. The larger of the wings contained the proscenium. Proscenium theater, guys, so if you guys don't know, proscenium theaters are the theaters you go into that instead of like pulling out the scenery in the background, they can fly it in because they go up really tall. So they're the ones with, you see the sandbags like in the movies. Those are proscenium theaters, and they can fly stuff up and down, fly stuff side to side without touching it. That's how tall they are. The larger of the wings contained the proscenium theater, with the rear stage wall abutting Johnson Street. This wing also included the auditorium seating area, the stage, the actors' dressing rooms, and storage for scenery, furniture, props, and flats, and painted backgrounds. 20-foot wide scene doors opened onto Johnson Street to accommodate large scenery and props. The stage doors were also on Johnson Street. These were smaller, but still wide enough for people carrying armloads of props or costumes to get through comfortably. As those 2 sets of doors were accessible to the stage, they were reserved for use by the production crews. The Two Orphans had been held over due to its popularity, but it was nearing the end of its run. Materials for the next 2 productions were already being stored at the theater. The backstage area, usually fairly spacious, was crammed with tightly packed items such as scenery, flats. This made it difficult for actors and crew to walk around backstage and in the wings. Space was at such a premium that the managers decided that the fire buckets that were filled with water should be removed so people wouldn't knock them over and spill them while trying to maneuver around all the extra set pieces. Even more scenery flats were stacked leaning against the back wall, blocking the fire hose. The architect who designed the building, Thomas R. Jackson, had the safety of the theater patrons uppermost in his mind. He designed the theater so that in case of emergency, the building could be completely emptied within 5 minutes. There were no fire escapes, but Jackson built 3 special exits into the long wall of the L. In addition to the large scene And stage doors, there were 3 6-foot wide double doors that opened onto Flood's Alley, which led to Washington Street, although these doors were kept locked to prevent people sneaking in without a ticket. The ushers all had keys to the doors, so they could be opened easily and at a moment's notice. The theater had 3 seating levels with different ticket prices, according to desirability of seats. On the main floor, there were 600 seats in 2 sections, Parquet and Parquet Circle. The best seats were in Parquet Circle, and those tickets were $1.50. Parquet seating was close to the stage, meaning that although patrons were close to the action, the sight lines weren't as good. Those seats were not ideal, so they were priced at 75 cents. The lower balcony held 550 seats at $1 each. The upper balcony, or family circle, sat at 450 patrons, with seats priced at just 50 cents. The main flight of stairs from the first balcony was 10 feet wide and led to the box office lobby. The family circle, though, had a different design than the 2 lower levels. It had only one exit, and that was a staircase leading from the upper balcony. It was a generous width, nearly 7 feet, but to get downstairs, patrons had to walk down 2 flights of stairs, separated by a long corridor, just as on a ship. The folks in the cheap seats weren't allowed to mingle with the patrons who paid higher prices for their tickets. The family circle had a separate entrance, a separate set of stairs, even a separate box office. The theater was lit with gas lighting. The stage itself also used gas lights equipped with reflectors and protective wire frames. The wire enclosures were designed to keep objects at least a foot away from the open flame. During the performance of The Two Orphans on December 5th, there were about 1,200 people inside that theater, including over 100 theater employees, actors, and stage crew. The house manager reported that they had sold about 250 tickets for Parquet and Parquet Circle, less than half of the 600 seat capacity. 360 tickets for Dress Circle, over half of the 550 seats, and 400 tickets for Family Circle, meaning nearly all the 450 seats that were filled. Not bad for a Tuesday night. Just past 11 p.m., the curtain was set to rise on the 5th and final act of the play. Stage manager J.W. Thorpe noticed that a set piece had just been raised to get it out of the way, was hanging at a funny angle. It had a torn corner. Worse than that, there was a small fire, not much bigger than a man's fist, burning in the damaged corner. Thorpe realized that the piece had gotten hung up for a moment on the wire cage of one of the gas lights as it was raised and had ignited. The star of the show, actress Kate Claxton, was in position for the beginning of the scene. She was lying on her back on a straw pallet, the stage having been arranged to look like a derelict boathouse. 2 other actors were also on their marks, waiting for the curtain to rise, with 2 more waiting in the wings for their cues. The theater was filled with a hush and an expectant audience. Thorpe had a decision to make. There were no handy fire buckets filled with water, and he couldn't get the fire hose behind the flats leaning against the back wall. He signaled for the curtain to be raised anyway, and muttered for 2 nearby carpenters to try to beat the fire out. The curtain went up, and Kate gamely said her first few lines, lying on her bed of straw. She could see sparks floating above her as the carpenters whacked at the drop with long poles. As Kay lay there, another actress knelt just behind her, hidden from the audience by the canvas backdrop. "Save yourself, for God's sake," she whispered. "I'm running now." The fire grew bigger despite the carpenter's efforts, and soon licks of flames were drifting down, along with more sparks. Actress Marianne Ferrin, who had been waiting in the wings, jumped her cue and came out onto the stage to kneel next to Kate. Pretending to play her role, she whispered to Kate that the fire was growing. By this time, the audience could see smoke and flames coming from the stage, and they started to panic. One of the actors on stage, J.B. Studley, stepped to the front of the stage and tried to bully the audience back into their seats. "The play will go on and the fire will be put out. Be quiet. Get back in your seats," he shouted. Amazingly, this worked for a bit. The audience settled down, and some people did sit back down. Kate, having abandoned her pallet, attempted to further reassure the patrons. She too broke character and stepped forward, telling the audience that the fire was part of the play, nothing to be worried about. "Let's just remain calm." But As she said the last bit, a burning piece of wood fell to the stage at her feet. Everyone's nerve broke and panic swept the theater. Most of the actors and production crew found their way to the large stage doors and went through them to safety. But the growing fire blocked this escape for the audience. Head usher, Thomas Rockford, unlocked the emergency exit onto Flood's Alley at the rear of the auditorium. Patrons seated in the parquet circle on the main floor easily found their way out through that exit. But when Rockford opened the rear door exit, the sudden flow of fresh air into the building fed the flames, and the fire spread to the back of the auditorium and up toward the balconies. The people in the dress circle, which is the lower balcony, weren't having as much luck escaping the fire. Most people didn't know there was an emergency staircase on the opposite wall from the main staircase. So everyone in the dress circle stampeded for the main stairs, which led to the Washington Street lobby. The safety of the street lay just beyond the lobby, but panic stole reason, and the staircase soon became jammed with people trying to claw their way out. Fortunately for these trapped patrons, the 1st Precinct police station was just next door. Officers rushed to the scene, and several positioned themselves at the bottom of the stairs. Policemen and theater employees worked to untangle the crowd as people pushed to get to the exit. Nearly everyone who had been seated in the lower balcony eventually made it out of the building to safety. It was a far different story in the upper balcony, the family circle. Almost every seat in the upper balcony was filled, and when the fire broke out, all 400 people in the balcony surged toward the only exit. But just as in the lower balcony, the press of bodies quickly became a jam, with no one being able to move in the crush of panicked people. Down below, the raging fire filled the theater with heat and smoke, which pushed its way along the ceiling and collected in the upper balcony. Soon, the people trapped next to the ceiling began to pass out from the thick smoke and heated air. Firefighters and policemen had by now succeeded in clearing the stairs leading to the lower balcony. They made their way to the dress circle, which was empty. Then they opened a door that connected to the family circle stairs and were met with a roiling wall of thick black smoke. They shouted up the stairs into the darkness, but got no response. Thinking that everyone in the upper balcony had escaped, District Engineer Farley ordered all the first responders out of the building. Within minutes of their evacuation, large cracks shot through the theater wall along Johnson Street. Just under half an hour after the tiny fist-sized fire was spotted, the entire wall of the theater collapsed in a roar of destruction. When Brooklyn Fire Department Chief Engineer Thomas Nevins arrived on the scene to take command just before 11:30 p.m., he realized quickly that the theater was a total loss. His job at that point was not to put out that blaze. His job was to keep other buildings from catching fire, like the hotel, which was snuggled right up against the burning theater. The Brooklyn Theater was allowed to burn itself out. A crowd of onlookers had begun to gather. Some of the people in the crowd were frantic with worry, asking desperately about missing family members. Despite this ominous outpouring of questions, the authorities honestly thought that most people had escaped the fire. Firefighters and policemen had searched the dress circle and found it empty. They hadn't made it as far as the family circle, but no one had answered their calls. Surely, they thought, most people had gotten out in time. Around 3 a.m., the blaze finally began to relent. Chief Nevins tried to enter the building, but then the heat and smoke were still too intense, and he had to back away. He tried again later and was able to get into the Johnson Street entrance. Just inside the lobby doors, he found the body of a woman sitting on the floor, propped up against the wall. Her legs had largely been burned off, and the rest of her body was severely burned as well. Nevins realized, with a sixth sense of horror, that where there was one body, there were bound to be others. He came back out of the building, but didn't tell anyone what he found. Okay, guys, remember, there's going to be stuff in here. Do not turn me into the internet police. There's going to be stuff in here that, it's kind of unsettling. So just work with me on this, okay? Don't turn me into the internet police. He feared that the milling crowd, already on edge with the tension of absurdity, would storm the crumbling building. No one entered the theater again until well after 6 a.m. The fire had nearly burned itself out. Almost nothing remained of the auditorium. The entire structure had all collapsed into the cellar. Chief Nevins decided the time had come to enter the theater once again. The first thing the firemen noticed was that the cellar was filled with a tangle of charred debris. As they came closer, they realized with a jolt that the blackened material in the cellar wasn't just rubble. It was a smoking tangle of unalived people. When the balconies had burned through and collapsed into the cellar, they had taken all these poor souls, the people trapped in the family circle, with them. Although the bodies were horribly burned, the victims had died of smoke inhalation and heat long before the building's collapse. The firemen staggered from the cellar with the news that as many as 20 people had perished. By 9 a.m., as the firemen worked steadily on retrieving the bodies, that number had risen to 70. 2 hours after that, they'd found 20 more victims. By early afternoon, firemen estimated that over 200 people had lost their lives to the fire. It would take nearly 3 days for workers to remove all of the unalive from the smoldering wreckage of the Brooklyn Theater. Many corpses simply fell apart as firemen tried to pick them up, or crumbled at the slightest touch. In many cases, the bodies were burned beyond recognition, and so badly that not even gender could be determined. In the end, nearly 100 victims of the fire could not be identified. They were buried in a mass grave in Greenwood Cemetery by the city of Brooklyn. The grave, dug in a semicircle, was used for the victims that could not be identified, and for people whose families couldn't afford to pay for burial. After all, most of the victims had been the Shiva seats. 103 people were laid to rest in that common grave. They were arranged with their heads towards the center of the semicircle in donated coffins trimmed with silver. Over 2,000 people attended the services for these mostly unknown victims. The number of people alive in the Brooklyn fire engraved on the memorial marker in Greenwood Cemetery is 288. But it wasn't easy to arrive at that number, and it may not even be correct. It was difficult for the coroner's office to figure out how many complete bodies could be made up from those piles of arms and legs and torsos. And it was impossible to account for body parts that had been burned away entirely. Henry Sims, the coroner for Kings County, announced the death toll is 293 on the Friday following the fire, but later revised it down to 283. Later, researchers have placed the number of victims closer to 300. For the first 2 days, my glasses are slipping. I hate that. For the first 2 days of recovery efforts, the fire, much of the work, including guarding the ruins, was done by Brooklyn Police Department. Many of the officers had been working around the clock and had been called to the scene from their regular beats around the city. Members of the 13th and 14th Regiments of the New York National Guard offered to stand in for the officers, giving them a much-needed rest and allowing them to resume their usual duties. The 14th Regiment was given the night shift, beginning at 6:30 p.m. At first, the guardsmen were kept busy, patrolling the charred ruins, but keeping mourners safe and warning away any curiosity seekers and scavengers. But eventually things settled down, and the guardsmen were left to watch over the site in quiet wakefulness. But the guards were alone. Sometimes they would hear the soft sound of a woman's sobs coming from the cellar. No one was allowed inside the building, especially at night. The wreckage of the cellar was pitch black, and it was dangerous to go wandering around. 2 of the guards, hearing these desolate cries, went into the building to find the distraught woman. They saw a dark shape in the cellar, a woman, or so they thought. She was walking through the debris, weeping, bent over as though she was looking for something or someone. One of the men clambered over the wreckage to get closer to her, to try and escort her out of the dangerous ruins. But as he got closer, the woman just vanished. The spirit appeared 2 more times over the next week, then was never seen or heard of again. The woman found what she was looking for, or she just gave up. All right, the next one. How cheery is that? The next one is the Ashtabula Bridge disaster. Guys, I'm collecting, trying to collect 6 chatting popcorns. If you guys could help me with that, that would be great. If not, like, follow, share. Let TikTok know we're live. Get more people in here. Let's pull some more people in, you guys. It was 4 days after Christmas, 1876, and the Lakeshore Pacific Express was behind schedule. The westbound passenger train was on its evening run from Buffalo, New York to Cleveland, Ohio. A blizzard had swept through the region the day before, and mounds of snow covered the track of the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern line. Two locomotives, Socrates and Columbia, had been pressed into service to pull the 11-car train through the deep snow. The locomotives pulled 2 express cars, 2 baggage cars, 1 smoking car, 3 sleeping cars, and 3 coaches through the dark night. The wind was still blowing fiercely at speeds of 40 miles per hour, limiting visibility and slowing the train to a crawl. The train was headed for the Ashtabula station, but it would never reach its destination. At around 7:30 p.m., the train approached the bridge over the Ashtabula River. The station was just 1,000 feet beyond the end of the bridge. The engineer let himself breathe a sigh of relief. They were nearly there. Darkness had fallen a couple of hours ago, and the engineer was relying on the cone of light ahead of him and the feel of the tracks underneath him. As the engine started across the bridge, the engineer realized something was very wrong. The bridge was collapsing beneath the train. The engineer frantically shoveled coal into Socrates' fires, stoking them in a race against time, trying to urge the train to safety on the other side of the 157-foot-long bridge. They were so close, so close. But as Socrates reached the west end of the bridge, the engineer felt a crack and a sickening shift. The stress was just too much. The coupling between Socrates and Columbia sheared off, and Columbia and the rest of the train tore free and dropped into that river, plummeting 76 feet to land with an appalling crash. The wooden cars were heated by coal stoves and lit by oil candles. The cars erupted into flames as they hit the shallow waters of the river, turning every car into a twisted mass of burning wreckage. The howling winter winds whipped the flames even higher. Passengers screamed for help as they were burned alive. The engineer pulled Socrates into the station and called the fire department, but the deep snow had blocked many roads, and a painfully long time passed before rescuers even arrived. By the time the firemen arrived and could get their steam-powered fire engines down to the river's edge, many passengers had already unalived. Just like the engineer, the firemen could only stand and watch the cars burn. One of the heroes of this disaster was Charles B. Cook, the nation's first African-American telegraph operator. He stayed at his post at the Ashtabula Railroad Depot for 50 hours without a break, first sending news of the disaster, then sending appeals for help, and responding to questions from anxious families. By the next morning, 92 of the train's 159 passengers had died. Some say as many as 97 people passed away. 48 of them have been burned beyond recognition. Some 64 passengers and crew had escaped but were injured. That day, a jury was formed to determine the cause of the tragedy. After 2 months of research, the jury concluded that the blame for the accident rested squarely on the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railway. 11 years earlier, Chief Engineer Charles Collins had looked over an experimental bridge design submitted by another engineer, Amasa Stone. In Stone's design, each beam and truss would work independently of each other. This was a highly experimental design. In most bridges, all the components are designed to support each other. Bridge design at the time called for wooden braces to support the iron beams. Stone, though, insisted the structure be made entirely of iron. The iron beams, furthermore, were to come from Cleveland Rolling Mill Company, the ironworks run by Amasa Stone's brother. Collins reluctantly approved the design, and the bridge was built. Over time, the beams of the bridge twisted slightly with the weight of the trains crossing it several times a day. This slow twisting out of true weakened the entire structure. Also, it's possible that air bubbles formed inside the iron castings as the beams were manufactured. This manufacturing flaw possibly caused the beams themselves to weaken in extremely cold weather, like the day after a blizzard in late December. The Ashtabula War was a disaster not only for the victims who perished in the burning wreckage, but also for the men held responsible. After Collins testified about his role in the disaster, he was found dead in his Cleveland home from a pew-pew wound to the head. A pew-pew lay at his side. The death was ruled a suicide, but 2 years later, his skull was sent to a medical expert in New York for examination. The expert found that, according to the skull wound, it was possible Collins had been unalived. He could not have been attacked by a grieving relative or someone who died in the train crash. I'm sorry, he could have been attacked by a grieving relative of someone who died in the train crash. More ominously, he may have been killed by someone from the railroad trying to shut him up, to prevent him from testifying further. However, Collins had died. He soon found company. A mass of stone unalived his own head in 1883. Chestnut Grove Cemetery is the final resting place of the unidentified victims of one of the worst train disasters in Ohio's history. An obelisk 37 feet tall was erected in 1896 to honor the dead. The remains of at least 25 people are buried in 19 coffins in that cemetery. Photographers taking pictures have captured orbs and other unexplained anomalies, phenomena that are attributed to the restless victims of that horror. Charles Collins is also buried in Chestnut Grove Cemetery. His spirit has been seen leaning against the memorial obelisk for the train wreck victims, weeping for the lives lost because of his bad decision. The crash of NBR 224. The weather on the night of December 28, 1879, was foul in Scotland. Gale force winds howled across the crags, and the powerful locomotive Northern British Railway 224 fought the elements as it steamed along the cold, rain-swept tracks. The train approached the Tay Bridge between Dundee and Wormit at speed. As it reached the middle of the bridge, the center span creaked and shuddered, with the twin trusses of the locomotive above it and the violent winds all around it. The bridge suddenly gave out, sending NBR 224 and all its cars into the freezing waters. 75 people died that night, including the son-in-law of the bridge's designer. Some of the bodies were never recovered. The locomotive itself was raised from the bottom of the estuary, salvaged, and put back into service. The Tay Bridge, too, was rebuilt using some of the beams from the original bridge. The reconditioned locomotive was ominously nicknamed the Diver, and many engineers were too spooked to drive it, especially over the rebuilt bridge. Despite its dire reputation, though, the Diver remained in service until 1919. For years, witnesses have said that if you stand on the shore of the Firth near the Tay Bridge at 7:15 p.m. on the anniversary of the accident, you can see the ghostly lights of a phantom locomotive and hear screams and the screech of NBR 224's brakes as that tragedy replays itself. The Iroquois Theater fire. Double tap that screen, everybody. It's the age-old question. What does a parent do to entertain their kid in the week and a half or so of Christmas break that comes after Christmas? The presents have been opened. The happy anticipation is gone. You can't even tell the kiddos to be good in case Santa's watching. At this point in the year, it's an empty threat. It's likely too cold to play outside for very long. One solution for modern parents is to take kids to a movie. In 1903, the matinee performance of a play was the equivalent. There was such a matinee being performed on Wednesday afternoon, December 30th, 1903, at the Iroquois Theater on Randolph Street in downtown Chicago. The theater had opened just weeks before, and it was magnificent. The day was bitterly cold, and the theater was packed for the hit comedy Mr. Bluebeard. Officially, the theater seated 1,602 people, but patrons kept coming in late arrivals. People who bought tickets for standing room. Folks with guest passes. By the time the curtain rose on the first act, about 1,840 people, most of them women and children, were crammed into that opulent theater. The opulent theater. One usher later claimed that there were at least 500 people standing in the aisles, and every seat was full. Another 400 people were backstage. Actors, dancers, acrobats, and stagehands. The theater was dangerously overcrowded, but people were having a ball. The first act was a hit, and the audience buzzed happily during the intermission. The trouble began in the second act around 3:20 p.m. A carbon arc lamp sputtered, and a spark flew off and hit one. See, here's where I need to use this because it's hot here. Hang on, you guys. Give me a nice quick cool down. There we go. Ah, okay. Anyway, the spark flew off and hit one of the stage curtains. A lick of flame crawled along the edge of the curtain. Some of the backstage crew tried to beat it out with their hands, but the fire grew. The Iroquois was fitted with a fireproof asbestos curtain for just this sort of emergency. But the stagehand, Joe Dougherty, was filling in for the regular curtain man, who was in the hospital. Dougherty couldn't remember which rope controlled the asbestos curtain. He fiddled with it for a while, trying to drop it. The fire continued to grow, and soon the theater was engulfed in flames. The blaze was quick and utterly merciless. One of the stagehands opened one of the big double doors at the back of the theater. This saved a lot of the cast members, but it was bad news for the people trapped in the balcony and gallery. The contractors who built the theater nailed the vents over the stage shut and left the vents over the auditorium open. The blast of cold air that poured in through the scenery doors mixed with the hot air in the theater and created a deadly tornado of fire that cannoned up to the open roof vents above the auditorium. The fireball sucked the oxygen out of the air, burning and asphyxiating everyone in the upper tiers. In about 15 minutes, the fire that swept through the Iroquois Theater claimed 572 lives, most of them women and children out for an afternoon of entertainment. Most victims died later, bringing the final death toll to 602, including 212 children. Please do not turn me into internet police. The Iroquois had been billed as absolutely fireproof, but it absolutely was not. And the rush to open the theater, management cut corners. A lot of them. There were no fire alarms installed in the theater. There were no sprinklers either. Management had decided they were too expensive and ugly to boot. The supposedly fireproof asbestos curtain wasn't made of asbestos at all. It was actually made of cotton and other combustible material. And the theater's 25 exits, which architect Benjamin Marshall said will allow the building to be emptied within 5 minutes, those doors opened inward, not outward. Many in the audience discovered this to their dismay. And when firemen arrived at the theater, they couldn't open the auditorium doors. There were too many bodies stacked up against them. The firemen had to pull the bodies out of the way with pike poles, then climb over the stacks of bodies to get into the theater to fight the fire. To keep the audience from being distracted during a show, theater management came up with the bright idea of turning off the exit lights. Of the few exit lights that were on, one led only to a ladies' restroom, and another led to a locked door for a private stairway. Perhaps most tragically, the fire escape door behind the top balcony didn't actually lead to a fire escape. So when patrons yanked open the door, hoping to clatter down an iron staircase to safety, they found themselves standing on a platform that overlooked a 50-foot drop into the cobblestones in the alley below. Couch Place was later rechristened Death Alley by reporters who counted nearly 150 bodies laying there. Some had been placed there by firemen, but others had fallen to their deaths from the platform above. The ghost sightings at the Iroquois are many and legendary, and they began even before the ashes had stopped smoldering. Photographs taken that afternoon of the ruined auditorium show strange blobs of light and mist. In the 1920s, the old theater was replaced by a newer building, the Oriental. According to theater employees, the building is still haunted by the ghosts of those who perished there, and by the memories of that terrible day. The stage curtain tends to stick when it gets about 5 feet down, just as the fire curtain did so long ago. One of the spotlights right near the location of the light that started the fire will flash and blink independently of the computerized circuits that now control it. Theater staff claim to see people in the balcony, but when they go upstairs, there's no one behind the locked doors. And then there is Death Alley, which is often said to be more haunted than the theater itself. People often encounter cold spots and have heard the eerie sounds of children laughing and playing. Many people who walk through the alley feel an uneasy sense of discomfort there, unsettling and creepy. But there is at least one person who is compassionate rather than creeped out. Ursula Bielski leads Chicago Hauntings ghost tours, taking busloads of people to sites all over the city. She has been in the alley behind the Iroquois hundreds of times. She's told the story of the tragedy of hundreds Where am I at? Okay. She's told the story of the tragedy hundreds of times, and every time she is overcome once again by the thought of 602 souls who perished. So is her audience both the people on the tour bus and those that still haunt Death Alley? A few years ago, Ursula went to Michigan Paracon in Sault Ste. Marie. While she was there, she struck up a conversation with a psychic medium. The two women were just chattering to pass the time. I hadn't set up a table with my books or anything, and I hadn't even gotten on stage to do my presentation. This lady had no idea who I was, and we hadn't even been talking about much in the way of the paranormal. She didn't even know about the tours. Nevertheless, the medium told Ursula something that rocked her to her core. She said, "You go to a lot of places in the town where you live, and you're with different people every night." At the time, Ursula was leading every tour herself, so this was entirely accurate. Then the medium continued. She said, "At one of the places you go, the people are waiting for you, and they miss you. You tell their stories." Ursula's eyes widened. There was no way for this medium to know that Ursula was tiring of the weary grind of leading every single tour, of returning to the crime scenes and the haunted places of Chicago's underbelly night after night. There was no way for the medium to know that Ursula had taken a couple months off from her grueling schedule of tours. But the medium did know that the victims of the Iroquois Theater were aware of Ursula's devotion to their story. All right, we should be able to do one more. The 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 Monanga mine disaster. Okay, can't pronounce half this stuff. The worst mining disaster in American history happened on December 6, 1907, in West Virginia. We're just going to go with West Virginia. The Norfolk and Western Railway opened in 1883, resulting in a boom in the untapped coal fields of southwestern West Virginia. Um, of African Americans from the South and European immigrants poured into the state to take advantage of this new opportunity. Officially, there were 367 men working in the Fairmount Coal Company's number 6 and number 8 mines that day. Unofficially, the number may have been much higher. Miners often brought their children and other relatives down with them for extra help. The explosion that ripped through the mines at 10:28 a.m. killed most of the men instantly. Mining equipment was destroyed, and ventilation systems were heavily damaged. The tunnel ceilings collapsed as the timbers supporting the roof were blown out. The number 8 mine had the worst of the explosion. The concrete roof of the engine house was blasted into fragments. One piece weighing over 400 pounds was blown more than 500 yards. The official cause of the blast was never determined. Later, people speculated that an electrical spark or an open flame lamp may have ignited a pocket of methane gas or a film of drifting coal dust. But these mines were considered the best in the state. In fact, they just passed inspection. The fan at number 8 would force 240,000 cubic feet of fresh air into the mine every minute. During the October 6th inspection, no trace of gas or dust was found in number 8, and only a slight trace of dust in number 6. The explosion was probably caused by a powder ignition that went horribly wrong. The first rescuers ventured into the mines 25 minutes after the explosion. The biggest threat to the rescuers, and to any man possibly left alive in the mines after the explosion and resulting tunnel collapse, was the buildup of fumes. There was white damp, which is carbon monoxide, and black damp, carbon dioxide and nitrogen. And either one could kill a man just as dead. The dead miners the rescuers found had tried to cover their faces with their jackets or other clothing. This would have helped filter out particulate matter, but it was no help at all when there was no oxygen to be had. Death came so suddenly that many victims were found sitting upright, overcome by deadly gases too quickly, even to slump to the ground. The rescuers could only stay in the mine for 15 minutes at a time, since the ventilation equipment had been badly damaged. There was no way to pump out bad gases or to bring in fresh air. Of the 367 men on the mine's books that day, 362 of them died. One Polish miner was rescued. and 4 Italian miners managed to escape. Many of the Italian miners came from the village of San Giovanni in Fiore, Italy. In 2003, the village erected a memorial to commemorate the disaster. The inscription reads, Per non dimenticare minatori calabresi morte nel West Virginia. And it means what? Okay, lest we forget, the Calabrian miners dead in West Virginia, USA. The sacrifice of those strong men shall bolster new generations. Managua, December 1907. San Giovanni and Fiore, 2003. And in 2007, the centennial anniversary of the tragedy, the Italian region of Molise presented a bell to the town. It now sits proudly in the Monongahela town square, a reminder of lives lost from half a world away. All right, well, what time is it? 7:38. Okay, we can squeeze one more in. The Union Stockyards Fire. Chicago's famous for being the city of big shoulders, a leader of industry of all kinds, major railroad hub, center of manufacturing, hostess of vibrant culture. Chicago also has the nickname Hog Butcher of the World. From the Civil War until the 1920s, more meat was processed in Chicago than in any other place in the world. Construction on the famous Union Stockyards began June 1865, and the yards opened on Christmas Day of that year. The complex encompassed 450 acres of land. On the site were animal pens, haylofts, barns, slaughterhouses, packing plants, and refrigerated warehouses, all run by more than 100 separate meat packing businesses. The Union Stockyards was a messy, loud, dangerous place, made even more notorious by Upton Sinclair's 1906 expose, The Jungle. And on December 22nd, 1910, the Stockyards became the site of the deadliest building collapse in American history, a title it held until September 11th, 2001. Railroad tracks ran through the middle of the stockyards, bringing in thousands of head of livestock for slaughter and taking meat products out. In addition to barns filled with hay, there were other fire concerns. The buildings devoted to slaughter and meat processing were coated with grease. Refrigerated warehouses were a particular fire hazard. Not only were the wooden floors and walls caked in grease from animal fat, they also contained carcasses of hogs cured with saltpeter, one of the main ingredients in gunpowder. And conditions in the stockyards weren't ideal. Fire Marshal James Horan was greatly concerned about the lack of safety preparation that plagued the stockyards. Just a week before the blaze of December 22nd, 23rd, Horan had been at the scene of another fire at the stockyards, this one in the armory. One of Chief Horan's men had been trapped by the raging fire. Horan tried to save the man, but pulled him out of the building dead. Chief Horan was known for being an innovator, as well as a fearless firefighter. He was respected for the many rescues he'd done, both of civilians and of fellow firemen. He created several new fire companies in the city and pushed tirelessly for better water pressure. We can't put out a fire without water, Horan said reasonably. My men are as game, a lot, as live, and they are perfectly willing to risk their lives to save property, but it is only fair that they should have mechanical help. The fact remains that a mere thing of flesh and blood can't put out a mountain of flames with his bare hands. The pain of the loss of one of his men still raw. Chief Horan went before the city council to ask for better water pressure at the stockyards on December 21st, 1910, less than 24 hours before the monstrous fire began. The first alarm came in at 4:08 a.m. December 22nd. A faulty electrical socket in the basement of the Nelson Morris building, a cold storage facility on the 4300 block of Loomis, had sparked and set afire. A night watchman... Oh, let me know. Okay, we're stuck. What? Oh, there we go. Hang on. Okay. Called in the alarm just half an hour later. The blaze had grown up to 4-alarm fire. Within a few hours, more than 35 engines were on scene. One of these engines brought Chief Horan to the site. The fire marshal's expertise was desperately needed in this tricky situation. There were several unique physical challenges to fighting the fire. Fire Marshal Horn already knew that the water pressure in the stockyard fire hydrants was woefully inadequate. To make matters worse, many of the hydrants had been shut off to keep them from freezing. The nearest hydrants were 1,200 feet away from the blaze. Building number 7 sat in the middle of the stockyards, surrounded by other buildings. It was right next to the railroad tracks, and a freight train was parked next to the blazing building. These obstructions made it impossible for the firefighters to set up their ladders, and the ladders were vital to the scene. Without them, the firemen couldn't get up to the windows on the upper floors of the 7-story building. The iron shutters on the windows needed to be opened to relieve the pressure that was building up rapidly inside the structure. The firemen knew that the cold air inside the refrigerated warehouse was heating up fast, and when the air heats up, it expands. If it expanded too quickly, the pressure inside the building would grow to a dangerous level. Chief Horn arrived at Building 7 around 5 a.m. He stood on the building's loading dock to assess the situation and direct operations. His fellow firefighters stood near him, waiting to be directed to where they were most needed. At that moment, tragedy struck. The pressure in Building 7 released itself in a massive fiery explosion. A wall 6 stories high collapsed onto the building dock. Chief James Horn was killed instantly. Also killed were Second Assistant Chief William Burroughs, 3 captains, 4 lieutenants, and 12 other firemen. The blast also set a nearby lard house 7 stories high on fire. Although devastated by the sudden loss of their colleagues, the other firefighters nonetheless swung. By the time the blaze was extinguished at 6:37 a.m., December 20th, 50 engine companies, 7 firemen in the walls. In some cases, the bodies were in pieces. One man's hand still clutched his fire axe, but his body was attached. The Union Stockyards fire made widows of 18 women. 40 children were left fatherless. The loss of these men was made even more poignant by the things and the people they left behind. 21 lives were cut tragically short. Lieutenant James Fitzgerald was supposed to have gotten married on Christmas Eve. Lieutenant Herman Brandenburg had switched days with a co-worker because he wanted to spend Christmas with his family. In William Weber's pocket were found 3 letters to Santa Claus. Weber, the driver of one of the engines, had planned to go Christmas shopping for his kids at the end of his shift. Edward Shawshett died on his 27th birthday. On Christmas Eve, he would have celebrated his 3rd wedding anniversary. Morning firemen draped Chief Horn's beloved roll-top desk in black crepe, but not before they made a heartbreaking discovery. Throughout December, hundreds of children had written letters to the Chicago Fire Department asking if the firemen could make skating rinks in their backyards. Fire Marshal Horn okayed one of these requests. On his desk was a memo urging that the rinks be poured before Christmas, so that the kids could enjoy their fun during Christmas break. 3 of the firemen were laid to rest on Christmas Eve, 8 on Christmas Day, 12 were buried December 26th, and the last one on December 27th. The families of the men were left to carry on, knowing that their loved ones were heroes, but mourning the cost of that honor. All right, that's going to do it for tonight, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Like I said, some stories are cheery in here, some aren't. It's how the book is. But all right, so talking about the next 4 or 5 days. Tomorrow I'll be back. I'll be back live on all the networks at 4:30 p.m. Pacific to build a gingerbread house, and that'll be the first part of building that house, and we'll probably stretch that over a couple days. 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll take a break, and then 6:30 p.m. Pacific, I'll be back on TikTok doing live readings for everybody. So this is we're on our Christmas schedule, so I hope you all join me for some fun with building. I'm going to ask you guys how you think I should put that gingerbread house together. I have 2 gingerbread houses to build this year and a couple of Lego kits to build and that model of the Millennium Falcon. So we're going to be doing that, okay? I want to thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And I'll see all of you tomorrow. Yeah, we're going to have a great time. All right, so see you later, TikTok. And thank everybody for coming. Thanks for any gifts that you might have done. I appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. So that's it, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow. If you want to join me at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube and Facebook, you can do that, and we'll be going live, working on that gingerbread house for a couple hours, for at least an hour and a half or so, and then I'll be back over on TikTok doing my live readings from 6:30 p.m. to like 10 p.m. Pacific. Okay, good to see you all. Thank you all for coming, and I mean, I could say enjoying the book, which it's an ebook to read. It's just kind of sad in a lot of ways, but that's what it's about. Like, so we call it the Spirits of Christmas, the Dark Side of the Holidays. So I want to thank you all, and hopefully I see you tomorrow. Okay, come on tomorrow while we're building. So here we go.